Planetopijin podcast.
To quote our honorary guest tonight, Jean-Martin Fortier, small-scale organic farming is changing the world. Jean-Martin Fortier is a shining example of how we should relate to food, to each other, to people and to the environment. He has inspired so many farmers around the world, including much of the work that has been done here at our own awarded Zrno organic farm led by Mr. David Pejić. So, with no further ado, please welcome the host of this talk, Mr. David Pejić, a CEO of BioVega, the best organic farmer in the European Union and the best young farmer in Croatia. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our honorary guest, Mr. Jean-Martin Fortier, the esteemed market gardener, best-selling author, a world-leading expert and practitioner in organic and bio-intensive agriculture. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vlasta. Good evening, everyone. JM, good evening.
Good evening, David.
It's a pleasure to have you here. It's been 5 or 6 years, the last time you were here, and I believe I speak on behalf of everyone in, again, inviting you once again to Croatia and being really honored to have you here again. So thank you once again. We had a couple of eventful conversations and days already, but I suggest we dive straight in.
Sure.
And begin. I would really like to start with the beginning. I would like you to start with, your own beginnings, your own inspirations on your journey to organic farming, so we can share that moment that led to all this future success or present success.
Okay. Well, first of all, before I start with my story, I want to say that I'm very humbled to be here and very well received. So the hospitality so far has been amazing. So thank you all for being here. Zagreb in Croatia is a special place already in my heart. So this is great. When I was a young lad student at university, I studied ecology, environmental science. I was studying climate change, the impact, the ecological impact of farming also. So that was what I was studying for 3 years. That's where I met my wife. And frankly, after 3 years, we were very discouraged with the state of affairs. That was more than 20 years ago. I remember we were studying the impact of climate change on farming. And so we resolved ourselves that we would make a difference, a positive one, with the work that we would do. And to be frank, when you decide that, it's not so easy to choose what is a good path. How can you really have an impact? How can you really live a life in accordance to your values? I remember very well we were struggling with this, and so we ended up taking a trip to travel, to open our minds. We went to fair trade coffee farms in Mexico, in the mountains, and we met the peasants there. It was really eye-opening. And then we went to New Mexico and we decided to volunteer on an organic farm. And I had never been on a farm. My parents were not hippies. They weren't into microbiotics. They weren't they were not pioneers in anything like that. And all of this was very new to me. And my wife also. But what we saw there, that was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the southwest of the United States. Going to farmer's market Saturday morning with the produce that we were growing during the week and seeing all these people lining up to buy fresh, local, organic vegetables directly from a farmer and thanking the farmer for the work. There was a big lineup. And I felt that there was a lot of sense in all of this because I was seeing how the work that we were doing in the field was translated to feeding people that were very into it And I was also analyzing that we were bypassing the globalized food system, because at that time I was still a lot in my head.
Yeah.
And I was discovering the joy of working with my hands, being outside, and doing applied ecology on a daily basis. I was enjoying myself very much. And like most young people, I was passionate about this, but I was thinking, can I make this work? And my role model was the first farm that I worked. And this person was from Quebec. I'm from Quebec in Canada. We speak French, so going to the US was also learning English, and it was a big thing. And he was a French-Canadian farming there. And he was the salad king of Santa Fe. Everybody would line up Saturday morning to get the salad mix of Richard. And I would see the cash that he would make on a Saturday morning. And that was also important for me, because the lifestyle was interesting. I would see that it was a very purposeful work, but I was also seeing Richard make some money.
Yeah.
And he would go and spend his winter traveling in Mexico. So for a young person, that was a very positive role model for me. And that's how I started. We did 2 years there. Then we came back to Quebec. Maud-Hélène, my wife, was pregnant. We lived in a teepee for 2 years in Quebec.
Can you explain to the audience what a teepee is? I think that's a fascinating...
It was one of the first mistakes that I made in my farming career. There's been a lot. But a teepee is, you know, those big huts where the Native Americans of the prairies would live. And in New Mexico, I had seen a young couple with their kids living and farming in a teepee. I thought it was brilliant, very inspired. So we built one in Quebec, but Quebec is very north. So these were hard years. But long story short, and I will wrap this. We did 10 really nice years in Quebec on my own farm. From the teepee, we bought another farm. And the reason why our farm became successful was because we had a serious land constraint. The plot that we bought was 4 hectares, and it was 3 hectares in woodlot. Yeah. So 1 hectare to cultivate. And that is the reason why we've developed everything that we've developed. We were land constrained, and we needed to optimize everything that we were doing. And over the years, we learned how to improve certain crops, how to multi-crop, how to grow one thing after the other, how to calculate all this very well. And after 10 years of growing quite successfully on our small farms, our farm on 1 hectare was generating more than $100,000 in sales. And eventually the word got out. We won a nice prize like you did, which goes a long way, and I congratulate you for this nice prize. We won a prize not because our farm was the prettiest or because it was more glamour, but because it had the best economical result of all the young farmers in Canada. Our ratio was 50%. So we were making $150,000 in sales, and we were netting about $65,000, which was really unheard of at the time. So to wrap this up, that's how my book, The Market Gardener, came into play. I took a year off to write The Market Gardener. And from the very, very early beginning, we're really passionate about 3 things. Soil ecology, working with the soil. Our farm is named La Grelinette, which is a very important tool to be very gentle with the soil. We work on permanent bed system. We were some of the first young farmers to grow no-till systems before it was popular. So soil ecology, lifestyle, making sure that the farm would work for us and not the other way around. Some of you in the room might have farms. It's like having twins, baby. It cries and it wants your attention and it's needy and there's always more work and it's such a big demand. So we quickly decided that we wanted to organize things so that the farm would not take us over. I had seen too many pioneers that were...
We will get into that, yeah.
That, they didn't, the childhood of their child wasn't very nice because they were working all the time. So we did not want that. And the last thing was we want to have good economics.
Yeah.
I did not choose this work to be poor. I wanted to be coherent with my values, productive, and have enough income to live the life that I want, of simplicity, but still.
Yeah.
And we've achieved that.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
On that note, I remember the saying that the most important type of sustainability is financial sustainability.
Yes,
right. We cannot do without that. I mean, what I find fascinating when I hear your story, it's really the sense of purpose, the passion, the directionality, and the sacrifices also. You might call them mistakes, but just these. Being so mission-driven, being so purpose-driven to live in a tent for 2 years with a young child, that speaks about the momentum of your movement, and from those, let us call them humble beginnings, it has taken you really far. Moving to the present now, you are now, if I may say, more than a farmer, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have all of these amazing connected ventures, right? So going from, Market Gardening Institute, there's an education platform, your newest project, The Old Mill, which is a restaurant and with an adjacent farm, the software, Heirloom, the magazine and apparel company, Growers & Co., like an amazing range of activities. It is not a surprise to me that your passion has driven you to that and you have accomplished that. But perhaps you can tell us a little bit about, the connecting vision between these endeavors and how you see the interplay of them and what your sort of thinking behind all of that is.
Yeah, so it's true. I do have a lot of venture and adventures. And of all these things, there's one thing that has never changed, is the vision that I have to change society with ecological agriculture. And doing it in a way where people do not feel that it's a constraint, it's a celebration. It's a celebration of coming together. It's a celebration of eating good, fresh, organic food. It's a celebration of working the land and being the steward of the land. Yeah. So for me, this has always made so much sense. And after the book, really, because the book is what took me a little bit out of my farm. Because when I published The Market Gardener, the book became very popular for some reason. I don't really know why. It had, from the really early start, a life of its own. I can tell a short story just to explain this. When it was published in Canada, in Quebec, I think the editor printed 500 copies or something like that. It was a very small print.
He was very careful.
Nobody believed in that book. It's like, this was a farming book. It's like there's no picture. It wasn't a popular book. And then some people started to read it, and then it got some press and more press, and for some reason it got very popular. And it was quickly out of print. Mm. So it took about 10 weeks for the book to be reprinted and back into the bookstores. Mm. So when it got back to the bookstore, that week it was number 2 on the best-selling list. Wow. It was 50 Shades of Grey and The Market Gardener. And it was
in the same category, next to each other.
Perfect.
Bundled up, perhaps, for
2 for 1. And so that was my first indication that something was there. And If you want later, we can circle back to the
Yeah.
market gardener. But
Yeah.
when the book was written, and after I was invited to give presentation conferences explaining my model, the book, for some of you that don't know it, it's not a book about the pleasure of farming or the adventure of farming. It's a technical book about how to do everything that we do. It's a very technical. It's a dry book, but somehow it touches people's heart because it explains how you can get into farming without large capital, without machinery, without a big farm, and with a sense of purpose. You can make it work, and here's how to do it. So it got popular, and it kind of sidetracked me of giving conferences, meeting people, seeing places, and seeing also other needs that needed to be filled,
Yeah.
to really take the society and bring it elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all my adventures, they share that. We want to move people in one way, and I use different strategies. Some have worked better than other. You've named some that has stick. Others haven't worked so well. But for me, I try to surround myself with very intelligent people and kind of connect them to what I'd like to see happen.
Yeah.
And that's why these businesses and adventures are there, because it's connecting super intelligent people in a purpose that I want to push.
Yeah. It's a fascinating system to observe. I was thinking about this, how, we have another thing in common here. So your business ecosystem is quite diverse. It is quite holistic in thinking. You have started with farming and then built upon all these beautiful building blocks around it.
Mm-hmm.
For us, for our organization, we started with other ventures. Farming was the missing piece. It was the last thing we needed to really make a complete circle and to integrate everything. And I remember when I came back from my studies in late 2015, and I went straight into farming. I asked where am I most needed, and my parents were very clear that it was the farm. And I remember my first season. I grew up in the area of organic food, but and I knew the principles of organic farming, but I never farmed.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first season, the first summer, late July, when we still in our different setup than we have today, when we lost control. We lost control of the season. I think you know the feeling.
That happens.
And you see a 2-hectare field that is gone to weeds completely. Mm-hmm. And I remember, in full honesty, at that very moment, I thought to myself, oh, okay, that's why there's herbicides. Right? Now I get it. Right?
Yeah.
But obviously that was not the mission. That was not something that was within our framework. And as I was, back then with my father, really trying to find solutions for our market needs and for our channels, researching online, it was your book and I'm sure you remember there was a documentary based on the book. That was the first introduction for me and for our farm to this new way of thinking. And again, it was life-changing, farm-changing. It was an incredible moment. Looking back, from the beginnings to the present, what's your sort of view, on key changes in small-scale agriculture? What have you, through your experience and this spread of time, I think we're talking about 20 plus years, right?
24.
24. Yeah. What have you seen as, certain developments, changes, maybe some surprises, maybe some disappointments,
Yeah, I'm very happy that you asked this, because the surprise, and it might be surprising, but all these years, my wife runs the farm. She's been running the farm. After the book, I started a farm school, and I farmed heavily there for 7 years, and then other projects. But all these 20 years, she's been running the same farm on that same hectare. And that farm has been giving beautiful produce all these years, feeding for most part, the same families all these years. We've had a lot of young people come and go, learn with us for a year or two and then move on, a lot of them. But that's been, looking back, it's for all these other things that I've done, that's the one thing that's always been there. And now, when I look at where I want to bring my energy and my role, I'm very inspired by my farm and by my wife that has kept it very simple and very effective and very real and the power of the small farm is really that. It's durable, it's a nice lifestyle, it can work. It all these years, it's never been a struggle. It's never been easy, but it's never been a disaster. It's always been a good year, some adjustments, and that's what I'm learning today.
Yeah.
And so I'm coming back to my original message, which is, farm simplicity, design. You took the good playbook on design, good planning, clear objectives, simple tools. Human scale farming has really the potential to provide good livelihood, and I'm very proud and happy of where we're at. The farm has never scaled up.
Yeah.
It has been kept to the size, and it's been profitable for many years.
Yeah.
So
I find this beautiful and fascinating on a couple of levels. First is that, reflecting on my question of the change throughout the 24 years and this entire journey, throughout all of that, when asked about what's important, you basically reflect on the very core, And again, this idea that your wife Madeleine is, engaged there still, and that's where, the source where you draw, the energy and the power from. I think that's a beautiful thought. And then again, on the other side, you mentioned, the farm has not scaled up. It has remained, at that area, but your reach, your effect has scaled up tremendously. You have reached more people, globally in many ways and inspired them. And in that way, you have increased the area of your farm. Walking around Zrno today, we had a brief moment where, I shared with you a truly honest impression, that whatever we have achieved on the farm, it's, in many ways due to you, So I think that's an important message on how we can scale up in different ways, not jeopardizing, not sacrificing quality, of what we do. Now, if there's one term I think that has followed your work, it would be, at least in my opinion, the word biointensive, right? Sometimes mistaken for biodynamic. It's not that, it's something else, it's biointensive. It is certainly a form of organic farming, right? But what would you say? You touched upon it briefly, but perhaps getting a little bit more into it. What is the role, really, and impact of the idea of biointensive, the concept of biointensive in small-scale farming?
Yeah, that's a really important question, and we should actually say biologically intensive, which is where the derivative biointensive comes from. Following the work of Alan Chadwick, that was an Englishman farming in Santa Cruz, California in the 60s. And Alan Chadwick had learned from old English farming books predating Second World War. And these old English farming books were telling the story of the old French market gardeners of Paris in the 1800s. These farms were the most productive farms probably ever. These were 1 acre farms, 2 acre farms, 1 hectare farm around Paris. There was tens of thousands of them. They were feeding a city of 3 million,
Wow.
bringing in fresh produce bringing back horse manure from the city. And these farms didn't have machinery, and they had figured out how to optimize the spacing of the crops so that they would produce as much as possible on their small piece of land. They would heavily fertilize or amend the soil with horse manure. So these soils were heavily amended with horse manure and composted, and it was double, triple, quadruple. There was up to 7 crops per year per bed. So they had really figured out how to interplant, because there was a big market in Paris and they wanted to optimize that. There was cloches to make sure that they would be early. They would water everything by hand. They would work 18, 20 hours a day. So it's definitely, but that's the root of this.
Yeah.
Okay, and this was kind of lost because most farms after the war were industrialized, and peasant farming became not very popular. Yeah. So I visited Cuba also. When I was living in the teepee, obviously the winter, we wanted to have some time off, so we went to Cuba, and that was the special years where the Soviet Union was dismantled and Cuba didn't have any fossil fuel on the island. This was a 10 years period. And their farming became 100% organic because they didn't have fuel for the tractors. They didn't have, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. These are all petroleum-based.
Yep.
They didn't have fertilizers because these are also petroleum-based. Yep. So they flipped the whole island to be 100% organic. And they were growing what's called organoponicos, which are permanent raised beds of cement-contoured beds, really densely planted. And I was there seeing for my eyes how you would have hectares and hectares and hectares of these non-tractor farm beds. And that's where all of this came back to me. And we put all of this into play. So biointensive, biologically intensive is you want to maximize the spacing of our crops so that they're very close, but we have really deep, loose, good soil. Soil that is alive, very fertile because it is alive, and then you have the roots of the vegetables that can really go down. And then when you're able to do that, then the crop is placed and then it forms a canopy, because the leaves quickly will touch one another, and that protects the soil, enhances the fertility. And so by doing it this way, you're able to grow more in small places, yep. And you're also enhancing the soil.
Yep.
So all of this comes into play, and that's a very smart way, as you've done on your farm, to optimize many operations on the farm. Because now with climate change, let's say we have problems with insects, we'll use insect nets.
Yep.
And you have both systems on your farm. In a typical row farm, you'll have, let's say, carrots. You'll have 5 rows of carrots on 3 meters.
Yep.
You'll have 5 rows of carrots on 1 meter, yep. Or half, 3/4 of a meter, 75 centimeters. So when you're putting an insect net, it's the same, you're covering the same amount, but in 1/5
yep.
of the material. It's the same with irrigation line. It's the same with many things. When we're scouting, everything's more present. So yeah. You optimize your space that way.
Yeah.
And that is one of the key to be really efficient in small-scale farming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This was, this matches so well with our experience when we were, when I was trying to solve some of the challenges of our vegetable production. And at the time, we only had the typical organic mechanized production. And, we have a chain of organic stores that have, demand. There's demand from customers for fresh vegetables, for, really high quality, fresh organic vegetables. And it was really hard to deliver that demand with mechanized farming because it's not flexible enough. You mechanized, vegetable production, you grow maybe twice on the same plot, or maybe 3 times if you're very, on point, or if the weather's good, In the biointensive system, because it doesn't depend on mechanized equipment, because it is designed for human scale, right? You can grow more frequently, more per square meter, and this has allowed us to really satisfy the demand of the channel that we had. And it's, that was what I expected, But what I was surprised by, what I understood later on, was the immense potential for, actual societal demographic change of this system, where it was after a while that I noticed that once you take out the machine out of the vegetable production, meaning the tractor, right, you suddenly democratize the availability of that system, both to not only men but women as well. Where previously on our farm, farming was a man's job, right, with the tractor and everything. Once we started up the biointensive garden, suddenly all the female workers who were maybe up to that point delegated to some simpler tasks or nursery or something like that, suddenly they became a fully valued workforce. And that was an incredible realization for me, and that's when I started to understand how your methods and how you completed them in an incredible package, how they could be a basis for changing the farming world, So that was, I think that's a really, really, that's our experience, and it was incredible. Now, I would like to change gears a little bit here now, and we mentioned biointensive as a term. Throughout the years, there's been more and more terms coming into the discussion, right? And one new one that's been recent, and that I would like us to talk about a little bit, even if it's not perhaps most familiar with the audience, but there's been a lot of talk about regenerative agriculture. It has taken a lot of mental space, in recent years. What would you say, what are your thoughts on the relationship between regenerative and organic farming, And maybe we can get a little bit into the question of whether it is an ally or perhaps a challenge.
It's hard for me to talk about this without becoming too passionate, because
Please, I think
I do feel that there's a strong warning. There's a big warning sign. Organic farming, we talk about not using pesticides, not using chemical fertilizers, but it's more than that. It's also taking care of the soil, and it's also it's a way of life. It's a way of farming that has constraints.
Yeah.
And you need to adhere to the constraints to be valued like that. I don't know if people in the room here are aware of this, but in the United States, the USDA, which is the government that rules organic certification, there's a national standard. 6 years ago has allowed hydroponics to be certified organic.
Yeah.
So food grown without soil can now be certified organic, which opens a lot of problems. Like real organic farmers, they understand that the nutrients and the value of the plant and what we eat comes from the soil.
Yeah.
Feed the soil, healthy plant, healthy people. Now we're taking that out of the equation. So just to say, now organic means hydroponic, it means many, many things. It could mean a big company like Walmart deciding to have warehouses of hydroponic lettuce called organic. I think what we've seen is that the word has been co-opted.
Yep.
So all these pioneers, like your parents and others here, all the work for promoting this for all these years And at one point when it becomes popular, it's not just the farms it's the food system that takes it, swallows it, because there's a good market opportunity.
Yeah.
Regenerative, to come back to your question, is a good idea. The idea that we want to avoid tilling because we want to make sure that soil isn't depleted. When you till the soil, it's like blowing on a fire. Okay? So you blow on a fire, it becomes really intense. If the analogy with the soil is as it gives a lot of fertility, when you blow it, you bring oxygen into the soil, you till it, then it becomes very fertile. But it also depletes the fire. So it depletes the organic matter. So the idea of no-till is to avoid that. Yeah. So you can build up the soils again. But what we rarely say is that it's because you're using herbicides. Yeah. So all the movement in the US of regenerative farming is heavily funded by Syngenta, by Monsanto, by Bayer's, because they're interested in selling herbicides. Yep. So I'm very aware of this, which kind of makes me cautious.
Yes.
It's loosely defined. There's no word that really certifies this. And so some people with the right intention, you and I, what I mean by regenerative, what you mean is not the same as what McDonald, McCain, Pepsi means by when they say that their farms are regenerative.
Absolutely. I would like to add a couple of points to that. Like, it is truly a bit of a tragedy that hydroponics has essentially been allowed in the US as organic. We in Europe here have a different situation, thanks to almost an accident in the way that the regulation has been written. Hydroponics is not allowed in organic certification in the EU, which, of course, I mean, to surprise of no one, I am in favor of, and I'm happy that it's that way. But I do think this issue of regenerative is very important because, I would just like to point out you are the ambassador of Rodale Institute. Mm-hmm. And for example, Rodale Institute is an institution in the United States that has tried to capture the term regenerative in a good way, right? So they have designed a private standard called regenerative organic.
Yes.
So this would be an upgrade.
Yes.
Yes, let's make organic even better. Let's make it regenerative organic,
And let's make regenerative organic. Yeah. It works both ways.
It works both ways.
Yes.
There is limited reach there because I think what has happened with the term is that for decades, these big corporations that you have named have been, pushed to the side a little bit in terms of sustainability. And then when they realized that they can capture a term that sounds incredible, and regenerative really does sound incredible.
Hard to say, though.
Yeah, hard to say.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Hard
but
to say.
They jumped on the opportunity. And, in 2019, we organized a conference in Croatia on the topic of regenerative farming because I had this really strong sensation that it's important that we at least do our part in the battle of trying to define the word in a way that it means organic. I'm not sure, globally speaking, we are winning that battle. And that's why I do think that regenerative in that regard represents quite a challenge. Mm-hmm. And it brings us to another topic that ties very well into this and that I wanted us to discuss is the general question of technology versus natural, balancing between technology and natural farming principles. How do we think about that? Because I think if there's this, especially in Croatia, there's this misconception. All right. Many times in the media, you will hear organic farming is the way our grandmas used to do it, or That's not true, right? That's really not true. Organic farming is not some kind of backwater, like a technologically deficient way of farming. No, it's not. It can be as modern as you can imagine, right? So that there's that thing. So it's not that in organic farming we are against technology per se, right? We are not. But there is this sort of, I still think there's a bit of a tension between, generally speaking, technological development and natural farming practices, How do you have any thoughts maybe on
this? Again, it's very complicated for me not to become very passionate or political on these things, because what I see, like, you're right, organic farming is everything except backward. It's like, I wonder why we have forgotten crop rotation, why we have forgotten the power of cover crop or green manures. Now, obviously, it has come back, but for how many years was this not present in as a trained agronomist giving consulting work? That wasn't even proposed to farmers. So let's say my neighbor, when I was starting in farming, he has the same crop rotation for the 20 years that we've been neighbor. It's 8 years corn, 3 years soya. And that's his crop rotation. And it's like, and then fertilizers every year and GMO and then spraying with glyphosate, and it's terrible. But I think the tension is because there is an industry that wants to sell and promote, and the industry is very much petroleum based.
Yep.
So petroleum, again, coming back to all the pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, these are all chemical based. So the chemical companies, the same companies that make the vaccines, that these are big companies, and they're very present in many ways. And so when you're trying to farm without these inputs, you're contrary to a lot of the GDP creation in a country. So, but that's the beauty of organic farming, and a lot of the pioneers, that was their goal.
Yep.
So I think it's very important that we re-emphasize the importance of organic. I think it's very important that we protect what organic means, and I hope that here in Europe, the watchguards will be very present.
Yep.
And regenerative is really interesting in its concept, because it's kind of talking about no-till systems, especially on larger fields, cereals and all of that. It's interesting, but we need to become much more aware of how chemicals in the food that we eat and in the water that we drink is making us sick.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't have enough information about that. And as an ambassador at Rodale, J.I. Rodale was one of the first one in the U.S. to talk about organic in the 50s, pretty much coined the word organic. And he came to that from a health background.
Yep.
It was a response to the chemical farming that was in the 50s quite terrible.
Yep. Yep.
So, and the work that we've done at Rodale is also to reconnect all of this to human health.
Yep.
And so the absence of chemical is very important in whichever word we want to use: natural, Korean farming, biointensive farming, regenerative organic, but leaving the chemicals, and I would even add big ag and big pharma, leaving them out of the equation is, I think, important.
Absolutely.
So, hence why it's hard for me to not become very political with these things.
Absolutely. I mean, it's to a degree, it's impossible to speak honestly, directly, and truthfully without taking a stand. And so I commend you for that. But I also would, listening to you, to these thoughts, I have a couple of, associated thoughts. Like I remember, just I'm a philosopher by trade. I obsess over words. It's not particularly exciting, but hopefully you're doing all right. But so like just thinking about the term conventional agriculture, it sounds so harmless. It's conventional. How could it be dangerous? There's nothing conventional about it. it's like literally less than 100 years old, yes. Right? It hasn't really taken ground, but there's been a interesting push to rename it to chemical agriculture, right? That would be more truthful in a way, right? But it doesn't sound nice, right? Would you buy products from chemical agriculture, right?
No.
Doesn't sound interesting, right? Conventional sounds nice. Not change anything, keep it to the convention, right? But I mean, it's really one of the paradoxes of human civilization that the one thing that is supposed to nurture us, right? Food. We have somehow managed to turn into poison, right? I mean, if anything describes the human paradoxical condition, then that's it. You know, we are a species of contradictions, right? I mean, I'm not, you know, it's just perhaps a fact.
And I want to jump on that just so that people understand, because perhaps some of you is the first time that you hear my message. And for the last 20 years, I haven't talked about that. I'm very interested in my farming strategies, farming techniques, developing better system of how to farm, growing great produce, going to market every week, seeing my clients, make them happy. You know, the cycle of farming. This is my life, and this is what I've always talked about, and very passionately, because I believe in this lifestyle, and I see the good that it has done. Like when we started our farm back home, there was one other organic farm. And I remember he was really bummed out that we were there. It's like, this is my turf. There's already an organic farm here. Now there's like 40 farms where I live. And it has created a beautiful community. We have Wednesday night farmer night, where all the people that are from the farm come in, and we have beers together. And it's been really epic. And I've seen the people that I've fed, you know, how they've appreciated that. It has created culture, community. And I've seen the impact of my book and my work, you know, really thinking all these years, we're growing the pie, we're out beating the system, we're creating the alternatives. And it's just recently, in the last 3 years, when organic was co-opted, that it kind of takes all of brings me to tear. All my heart and energy and my love is like, if somebody takes my work and translates it into something else, so I'm deeply disturbed.
Yeah.
And so that's why I talk about this. But just so you know, I'm not this radical, political young guy that's always been that way. It was all the contrary.
Yeah.
So
I understand that perfectly. The organic market and movement has changed quite a lot in recent years, and it in many ways, due to its success, it has entered the mainstream. And you know, we experienced this as pioneers, as an organization that has, you know, been promoting it for so many years. You know, suddenly, you know, something that we were, you know, almost, you know, burnt at the stake for, you know, is now being taken up by many different actors, you know, and, you know, actors who previously, you know, these supermarkets or, you know, like big corporations that, you know, that turned a blind eye to it, you know, are now taking it in. And in a way, that's a measure of success, right? Because organic still means something, at least in Europe, right? You know, at least we have a stronger standard. And, you know, and we see that as a success. But I understand you completely that as a farmer, and this is coming to my next topic, you know, it's when you invest energy into something for 10, 20 years, you know, and you have this feeling of making a difference, but at the same time, and you are really, you know, you're making a difference, it's spreading, you know, but at the same time, when your eyes are open, and I know yours are, it seems like there's a parallel trend, right? For example, right, I will give an example. You know, we are very proud in the European Union to have a nominal goal of having 25% of all land area organic by the year 2030. That's fantastic. It's beautiful, right? At the same time, there's an initiative to allow NGTs, new genomic techniques, some call it GMO2, right? Simply put, GMO2, to allow NGTs in conventional agriculture, okay? So how do we think about this? In one way, we are trying to make our agricultural system more organic. Let's increase to 25%. On the other hand, at the same time, we are making conventional agriculture less organic because we are adding GMOs to conventional in Europe, potentially, right? So this is what I mean when I say parallel trends. Mm-hmm. In one way, we are making progress. I'm talking as a civilization, as a society, not just organic farmers, right? Organic farmers care about all farmers. We're not, we're inclusive, right? So, this is the feeling of parallel trends. Of on one side we are, let's say, making progress. On the other side, things are perhaps accelerating in the other direction at the same time, right? I wonder what your thinking is here. And I know for me, it's sometimes, it's quite emotional also. Because I remember, 30 years ago, my father has received an award at the UN for, his achievements in Croatia during the war in terms of activism, promoting, healthy lifestyles and trying to build something during a difficult time, And I go back to his speech very often where, he sort of gave an overview of what was going on in this region. And I cannot shake off this feeling that you can copy-paste that speech to today, right? Despite all that we have achieved, it seems that there's still so much to do. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you feel about this.
Well, yeah, I think there is so much to do.
Yeah.
That's why we need to eat fresh organic vegetables, because we need to stay healthy ourselves.
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion that, regardless of if we win the influence game, the fact that we're smaller farms, direct selling, meeting people, that's something that can never be co-opted. Yes. You cannot co-opt my farm. You cannot co-opt that every week you'll go meet Modelen, my wife, and buy from her. It's like no marketing agency can ever copy that.
Yeah.
So I've always thought that the multiplication of small farms, direct selling, as much as possible is really, really one key. So I believe that, and that's what I stand for, and that's what I do every day. I wake up and I'm figuring out how can I help small farms. Can I develop a software to help them plan and crop better? Can I have a magazine that puts them in a light where they feel proud of themselves?
Yeah.
Where they adhere to not just the values, but also to a vision, like promoting, cool farms, like you do in sports.
Yeah.
So all these different things. So that's my road.
Yeah.
And it's the road that I want to take. And it would be very pleasant for me to just go back to my farm also and just say, fuck the system. We have a farm. We're self-sufficient. We have our little group, our little number here. We have our nice community. But I also feel, because I'm aware of all these issues and because I have now a forum to talk about this.
Yeah.
I do feel that we should all be very aware of the food that we eat, where it comes from. And I do feel that moving forward, the sourcing of how our food is going to be not just important for our health, but for food sovereignty.
Yeah.
So they're very tied. So anybody here in Croatia, it's the same in Quebec where I live, that is concerned about food sovereignty, the link is very simple. It's not technology. It's not vertical hydroponic farms that are sheltered from the impact of climate change. It's not robots in the fields. That's not what we need. What we need is more small, diversified because they're diversified, they're more resilient.
Yep.
And you can talk about that. But more small, resilient, diversified farm everywhere, in the country.
Yep.
So regardless of where climate change is impacting, because it will, some regions will be hit, others won't. Resiliency needs to be built that way. And that if the globalized food system breaks, as it has during the pandemic, back home, we depend on California in North America. It produces 70% of the food in the winter.
Yeah.
So, the food didn't come in for like a week, and it was chaos. And so that whole idea of just investing in smaller farms, investing on farms that are built and designed for the local market,
Yep.
and making sure that young people are getting into farming,
Yep.
that for me is really important, because that's how you build a culture around agriculture, and that's how you build a resilient food system that will, if everything goes bad, create the resiliency and the food sovereignty that we need.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I believe in that. That's the road that I'm kind of preaching for.
Yeah.
And I'm opposed to big technology in farming.
Yeah.
Not because it's wrong, but because it's pushing another agenda.
Yep.
And I think that the policymakers, they can easily get confused,
Yeah.
thinking, oh yeah, we need more robots on farms.
Yeah.
Perhaps we need more people on farms,
Yeah.
So,
There's a couple of words echo in my mind from what you just said. One is resilience. We have seen this on our farm in our application of your methods with respect to a topic that's present at every agricultural conference. There's no agricultural conference that goes without the topic of climate change. And it's a immense topic. And you usually have 2 minutes to give a meaningful answer to something like that, and it's very difficult. But I think when we talk about resilience, this is where adaptability to climate change has to come with resilience. I mean, it's a necessary ingredient, and this is where small-scale farming, bio-intensive farming, really shines. You and I both, as farmers, have experienced, and I'm sure every farmer in the room with us has experienced the effects of climate change. And what we have seen is how more adaptable small-scale farming, bio-intensive farming that doesn't depend on machinery is when it comes to extreme weather, right? It's much more flexible, much more adaptable, right? Let us not mention the fact that, again, organic farming does not rely on oil derivatives, So I think all that we are talking about, really, really paves a way towards answering the big question of climate change in a meaningful way, which I think is really important. But I would like us to plow ahead, if I may use that term, and start talking about people a little bit. And let's, I was thinking about this, question of popularity of bio-intensive farming, market gardening. I've read recently somewhere that these methods that you have championed have resulted in the greatest return of young people to rural areas since the 60s and the 70s. And it's for obvious reasons: less investment, less land needed. I think it's also for some other reasons, such as the fact that as superficial as it may sound, but market gardens are generally beautiful. Mm-hmm. And we do live, I think it's not a coincidence that, the rise of the market gardening has been correlated with the rise of social media, right? With visual media, with identifying with a certain lifestyle, And this is again somewhere I think that, small-scale farming has opened up an entire area for young people who maybe don't see themselves in urban areas, who are seeking a different lifestyle, a different ethos, they find an opportunity there. But I was wondering what your point of view is on this matter of popularity of the rising trend. You have seen many more farms than I have seen, and you have talked to many more young people, young farmers than I have. Would you say that the motivations are genuine, or is there a bit of a bubble effect?
No, I don't think it's a bubble. I think it's very economics. This is a really nice salad head of salad. It's very nice. It's a Salanova. How much is that worth in the market for somebody that buys it today? €2?
About okay. 2 years. We sell it for, I think, $2.29.
If I were to have a farm that was a big farm, a bigger farm than a market garden, I would grow these in a field and I would ship them to the distributor. And the distributor goes to the supermarket, and you lose about 60 to 70% of the value of the lettuce because you're growing in that setup. When I grow this and I go to market and I sell it for €2 or $2.50, that's $2.50 in my pocket instead of perhaps 40 cents or 50 cents.
Yeah.
So, and to grow a lettuce is not complicated. To have lettuce every week for 40 weeks when you're attending farmers market, that's where I come into play and teach people how to do this, but it's not complicated.
Yeah.
So to come back to your question, I think people are attracted because there's an economic behind it. You can reclaim.
Yeah.
So and I know that you have a supermarket, not a supermarket, but a retail chain, and I don't want to take business out of you, but
no.
All these young farmers, and sometimes they're not so young people, they're like, there's an opportunity to make a living by growing produce that I'm going to sell directly. We're talking about having 200, 300 families max. It's not a lot. Yeah. And supplying them every week with salad, radishes, beets, cucumbers, all the vegetables that they need and eat, and supplying them every week. So it's very doable.
Yeah.
And it makes there's a case to make an income that way.
Yeah.
Now, the trick is this works if there's an opportunity for you to sell this directly.
Yeah.
If there's not, or if people aren't willing to pay more than €1 for this, then it doesn't work.
I would like to, yeah.
Then it's more complicated.
Yeah. Just on that note, I would like to tell a short story to the audience. Yesterday we were taking a short walk around the city, and as we were passing the main square, I said to JM, let's go see the Dolac market, right? And I did tell you a little bit about the problems with our markets, but it was earlier before, and this was a fresh insight into the Dolac market. And as we were walking up the steps, finished the last step, and in 3 seconds of looking at Dolac market, JM said, resellers, a lot of resellers, right? And this is the issue, going back to what you said, where we are lacking, I think, today in Croatia to really jumpstart this movement, true, genuine markets, right? That represent local, small-scale farmers that have rules that don't allow others to get into that, and then again mask the difference. This is what you guys have, in where you come from.
And we've had people that have fought that hard battle.
Yeah.
Because once the resellers are there, some of them have been there for probably 20, 30 years. Taking them out of the market, they won't go without a fight. And some of these folks, I don't know here, but back home, we're talking about a real fight.
Yeah.
Like with perhaps your life in danger. So it needs to be well done, but you're right. If the opportunities to connect, like CSA was really a response to that. Farmers markets, also, having restaurants that are proudly sharing where the ingredients come from. All of this creates this sense of awareness of where the food comes from, or the retail stores.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely. As we're moving along the conversation and nearing the end, I would like to discuss one important topic, I think, for farmers, and one that is not often mentioned. And I know you talk about it openly, and I would like to, hear your thoughts about it here. The topic of burnout, because I think regardless of whether someone's an organic farmer or a conventional farmer, I think farming in general is not an easy life, right? And the issue of burnout is something that I have experienced personally. I have seen it in many visitors to our farm, and I have this thought that I wanted to share, and then hear your thoughts on the issue of burnout. I think it's especially prevalent in organic farming for a particular reason. I think that in conventional agriculture, we as a society, we try to, in a way, protect ourselves by reducing nature. We apply reductive methods, pesticides, strong tillage, so on, to simplify the process of creating value from nature. And in that way, in some way, we protect ourselves, right? What I've seen with organic, holistic farmers is that, in the great effort to work with nature in a way that protects it, farmers run the risk of reducing themselves, right? Of working endlessly, right? So, just maybe your brief thoughts on this topic of burnout.
Yeah, farmers, they're hard workers. There's a combination of two things. The farm always needing more work, which is the reality. And then the farmers always willing to put in more work. So you have kind of a freight train, and it's like farmers are very exploitive people. And because they're exploiting themselves.
Yeah.
They're willing to go the whole way to get the job done. And that's what makes them really valuable and courageous people. So when you're in that zone, you need to have checks. And that's what we teach. We teach young people especially, but also not so young. Just to have a structure, a start and an end time, how to organize your week, how to organize your day, so that you're putting some things in check. But, there's the burnout aspect of farming, which definitely, when the demand isn't there as so much, that creates a lot of turmoil. On reverse, when people in this room, when they go the extra mile and they buy locally and they buy from a farm, then the impact of that is so direct. Yeah. You change a farmer's life when you do that. But to come back to the burnout, for me, it has to do with just making sure that you are putting a structure around what you do. Yeah. And learning about this, sometimes you learn it the hard way. Sometimes you can do it preventively. But, a lot of farmers, they're very passionate about what they do. And there's something to say about, I've told you this, I think, but myself, I don't have a lot of balance in my life. I know this because I'm 46 now and I'm not going to change so much. But because I'm passionate about what I do and I love the extra work and I just want to, but I've learned how to create harmony around, especially my family, my kids, and I've learned how to cope with and it's the same for farmers. Some of them need to learn how to manage their energy, manage their efforts. Yeah. And there's no magical wand that's going to take that. I think burnouts are very present in other trades also. Yeah. But the farming, for real, for anyone that's been on a farm, it's so easy to work 7 days a week, 80 hours, 90, 100 hours a week. And, you can do that for a while. But if you don't take your Sundays off, if you don't cap your working hours, it's
Yeah.
not sustainable.
That's a simple but powerful message for farmers to count their hours. You know?
Yeah.
It's
count their hours. That's
I
a good
preach it, but
strategy.
I'm not sure I do it always. You know, like it's very simple.
110 hours? Whoa, that's
More
a lot.
hours than there realistically are in a day.
Yeah, and if some of you are coming to the workshop tomorrow, that's exactly what we teach them.
Yeah.
Is we teach them how to optimize their efforts so that they get more done with the same amount of energy.
Yeah.
And part of that is not to grow more. Coming back to the analogy of my wife still farming that hectare, it's not that you want to save time to grow more, it's that you want to save time to have more time.
Yeah.
To be with your children, to play tennis.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
You know?
Haven't played in years. Yeah.
Yeah, you should.
And I can already feel the gaze of my wife in the front row, her expectations for my free time rising as a tide. But wrapping up slowly, one of the elements of your visit here this year is a new book that we have published, a beautiful short book as a companion to the Market Gardener on tools. I was wondering about your thoughts, how this book, its place in your wider body of work, and maybe also in general the impact of education, the meaning of education for you.
Yeah, I've been so passionate about sharing, farming, growing practices to farmers, but home gardeners, there's a lot of potential there. Actually, if you think about it, if most people that have a lawn, I don't know here how it is, but back in America, it's kind of a joke. They all have big lawns, and they mow the lawn for hours on their Sundays. And you're just thinking, what if all these lawns would be growing food? And then also not just growing food, but also creating habitats for birds, for amphibians, just creating ecological niches in these yards. I'm just imagining if thousands and thousands and thousands of people would do that, what would be the impact on the biodiversity? And also for me as a market gardener, I've always tied production with income, because that's my job. And it's easy for me to show a gardener how they can generate 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 euros with their gardens.
Yeah.
And just kind of explain it to them in a way that they get it. And it's like if you're growing for 6,000 euros of produce in your backyard, that's like $10,000 earned because of income tax. And so this is the kind of language that I have, but showing people tools, methodology, how to organize your garden.
Yeah.
Again, coming back, I'm really passionate about all that.
Yeah.
So that's more my turf than the political aspect that we've talked about tonight.
I mean, for us, education is also at the core of our activities. I think it is an imperative to really instigate and manifest change in the world, and it all ties nicely into something that we repeat often within our organization: the idea of a healthy individual as a precondition for a healthy society. And I think it's a message that we can both agree in spreading. I would like to use the opportunity, and acknowledge the fact that we are really privileged to have important and valuable policymakers in our audience today. As someone who has, experienced so many different farming systems, so many different cultures, what have you perhaps identified as required or important in the terms of policy change that could really accelerate the future that we all share a passion for? I talked about this recently, but I think we all want more farmers, right? We want more farmers or more people in rural areas, right? So, and I see a lot of heads nodding, so I can sense that we can agree on that. Now listen to this. I will just say it differently. that literally means that we want more human labor in rural areas. Now that already sounds kind of like, what do you mean by that, you know? But that's what we mean, right? So going back to the question, do you have any sort of message or your, input for policymakers, for people who really have their finger on the buttons? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do. And I think from understanding, their role and their responsibilities, it's not to shut out one group for the other, but at least to acknowledge the potential of small farms, of human scale farming. 1 hectare could be a livelihood for a family. Yeah. Just acknowledging that it's not because the farm is small that it's not relevant, and that really keeping in mind that, and we have a problem back home. We have a generation of older farmers that want to retire, and it's going to be hard for them to retire if new people are not coming into farming.
Yeah.
So it's really important to think about how young people, not so young, but newcomers will coming into farming, and the scale is really critical. Like, think about scale. Like, somebody that's been even a very successful organic farmer for 30, 35 years has been growing his farm enterprise. He went through all the hurdles, made all the mistakes, mechanized and developed and opened this market and grew the farm. And now the farm is big. For a young person coming in, that's like asking a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it was asking a lot for you to take over your parents.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to do that start. So, thinking in terms of farms as perhaps scaling them down so that they're more accessible, but just having this notion of it's not a linear way, and making sure that there's market opportunities for local produce to have a place. That's so critical, because if the demand is not there, you can have the best market garden in the world, but if demand is not there, it's going to be hard. And I want to finish by saying one thing, and I honest to God, I'm not saying this because I'm here, but today I visited one of the most impressive farms that I've visited in all of these years, and that was your farm. Very, very well done.
Thank you.
I'm encouraging everyone to go and see for yourselves what this means, and I'm encouraging you to be outright with the numbers and to share and it's going to come with some people not being rubbed in the right way, but that's how I've had impact, is by opening my farm, opening my numbers, and sharing what we do, so that it triggers other people and saying, hey, this is what I want to do. Yeah. This is the model that I think is a good model, and that's the strategy that I'm going to take.
Yeah.
So,
thank you very much for those kind words. Our journey towards being what we wanted to be, and to be a role model, to be a symbol of organic agriculture in Croatia, in many ways started with your first visit. And one of my motivations for bringing you again was precisely for you to see how far we have come. I know this makes it a vanity project, and I have joked with my team that in a way there's a little bit of that. But what you have just shared with the entire audience, and I'm blushing, but it means very much to me, and it's beyond words what I'm feeling in that regard. So thank you very much for that. I would like to finish up with a final question. As many others here, we perceive you as a visionary. We perceive you as I have talked to your colleague Frederick today. There's a term in philosophy, the zeitgeist, the embodiment of like an idea of a spiritual development in a way, and I think you're even aware of that role that you have. What is next for JM, what are the long-term aspirations?
No, you know what? For me, coming and seeing the progress of people that I have influenced is worth so much.
Yeah.
Next time, I'd like to be with my wife.
Yeah.
And hang out more. Yeah. That's really where I'd like to be. Like, as much as I'm interested in change, there's a part of me also that is really inspired by just being part of the movement now.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've sparked, ignited some people, but it's bigger than me, and it's a big movement. I have the privilege to travel all over the world, and it's amazing how there's so many people that share this common vision of food grown with care by people who care, and creating local food hubs that are, in my opinion, the future of farming. Mm. So I just want to celebrate in those places and, you know, have fun, because it's all about that. It's about culture, and it's about food, and it's about getting together, you know, and spending time. So that's what I want to do with my next 20, 40 years.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for, at the very end, reminding us that, you know, that perhaps we were quite serious through some of the topics that we addressed. Thank you for reminding us about the leisure and the fun of it all. And thank you for being an inspiration to myself, to our organization, to, I believe, many people here. Thank you for all the impact that you have, all the energy, all the passion that you invest in everything that you do. And throughout these couple of days, we're still not done. We have tomorrow a great event coming up on the farm. We have discussed opportunities for long-term collaboration. We have discussed, you know, points of synergy between our endeavors. And all of this makes me very excited. And I am very excited, as you pointed out, as you encouraged us to share the message in Croatia, to spread the knowledge. We will do so. To anyone who's interested, we will open up. We are open already. We share the knowledge quite openly. JM, thank you for everything that you do.
All right. Thank you.